Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful August the 21st, 2019. Grando Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, right now my sports loyalty is being questioned. You know, the baseball has been on a torrid raid all summer long, but now football is trying to sneak in the back door and take over some of its luster.
Yeah, you know what they call sneaking in the back door is called getting into the game for free. I've done that many, many times, Big C, many, many moons ago, though. I do want to say there's so much happening in sports. I haven't been sleeping much. I've been doing a little bit of fasting and praying. But also, just the fact that football's here, in all of my life, it has been a seminal moment, at least in my family, where my brothers and I would just play and tailgate and do all the things you can do at a real game. I do want to say it brings back memories. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. Big C, I know... I was thinking about something. I was listening to some other programs here in Northern California. As I normally do, I have a lot of friends that work in the business. And somebody was talking about tailgating. And I think you said this too, because I know you eat a lot of meat. But you were saying that did you saute the meat for like 24 or 48 hours? I didn't get that wrong, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, we marinated. Sauteing is a wet thing. We marinated it with a dry rub, Charlton, let it sit up, make sure that all those flavors permeate throughout the meat before we put it in the smoker and everything to get that nice char and smoke ring on the meat, Charlton, and breaks it down and makes it oh so tender. I mean, it's just succulent. It falls off the bone and slips down your throat and makes your belly kind of big at the end of the day.
Well, I tell you, the problem with me, see, I should have listened. I tried to saute my salad, and I marinated it for like 24 hours. It was all soggy, Big C, so I guess it worked for me. But it's all fair and love and war. I want to jump right in to taking a deeper look into the top 25 greatest college football games of all time. And it's Big C Sports, in our opinion. Number 25, ending with think about endings and how sometimes endings start, but the beginning and the ending can be confusing. But ending between Colorado and Missouri, it was October 6, 1990. Because of an officiating blunder, the fifth down game was born. A 31-27, Missouri and Colorado faced a first and goal in the final minute of the game, if you recall. After spiking the ball, a failed rushing attempt, and the Buffaloes called a final timeout. However, the chain crew, they missed it, Big C, and it caused a lot of problems in that game, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, they were probably eating some buffalo burgers out there, and got a little lackadaisical and sleepy during that time. But you think about the wonders that we see now with replay, Charlton, and this was prior to instant replay, where the officials had an opportunity to go back on the sideline and check the down markers. But this cost the team a victory at that time, Charlton, because on the fifth down, Colorado was able to sneak it in for the touchdown.
And I guess that's how cheating was born. Was prop betting? They should put the prop bet for officials for that too, because some things I do not believe they're by accident, Big C, especially with betting. Also, January 1st, 1994, amazingly enough, a Tom Osborne team. Tommy, you think about Bobby Bowden, they had a national championship ring. When Nebraska and Florida State met for the national championship, it was in the Orange Bowl 1994. Now, Bobby Bowden came away with the victory. It was a nail-biter all the way down to the end. The Huskers kicker Brian Bennett hit a field goal to give his team a 16-5 lead with just over a minute remaining in the game. However, the ensuing kickoff went out of bounds, and it gave the Seminoles good field position. FSU Scott Bentley, he'd been a great field goal kicker. 21 seconds left, giving his team an 18-16 victory. But that game could have gone either way too, Big C. Your thoughts?
It could, Charlton. To have a great defensive battle go down as one of the greatest college football games of all time is an amazing feat. And when you think about these two Hall of Fame coaches in Osborne and Bobby Bowden, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, Florida State had always been known for kickers missing field goals. But Bentley on this time, Charlton, hit it true. You know, when the ball went out of bounds, they had great field position, able to march down, get in his field goal range.
Yep.
And Florida State was able to walk away with their first national championship for head coach Bobby Bowden.
Known as Wyatt Wright for that good old boy down in Florida State, Big C, November 16, 2013. Down 1 point, less than a minute to go, facing 4th down and 18. Auburn's quarterback, former Georgia defensive back Nick Marshall, threw a Hail Mary pass to Ricardo Lewis, and the ball actually was overthrown, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The ball was tipped, fell into the hands of the waiting hands of Lewis, who sprinted the rest of the way 73 yards for a touchdown, and Auburn won 43-38 over Georgia. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about this Georgia program, Charlton, over the past decade, has had some hard luck games. We remember the championship game that they played against Alabama a couple of years ago in Georgia.
Yeah.
You know, they lost out in that game when Tua came off the bench, Charlton. But everybody remembers that run that Auburn went on with Nick Marshall at quarterback that propelled them to the national championship game against Florida State.
Yeah.
But that Hail Mary pass that he threw at the end of the game, Charlton, it went right on the receiver's fingertips.
Yep.
He tipped it up in the air and ran back under it, Charlton. Just a great game for the Auburn history of their program.
Yeah, and another game that's a seminal moment, and a lot of it happens. There's a lot of change that goes on. We talked about the beginning and the end are sometimes the same. December 6th, 1969. The good old days of the Southwest Conference, and you recall that conference, Big C, Texas and Arkansas. The two played one of the most important games of all time, given the name, the game of the century. It was Arkansas Razorbacks. They had a 14-0 lead entering the fourth quarter. Them good boys from Texas and the officials, Big C, they rallied. With President Nixon watching, he had time to step away from Watergate just for a moment, Big C, to see the game. And the stands were filled with security, of course. But they saw a comeback 15-14 victory for the national championships. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you go back to a day when we had sanity in America, Charlton, when a president could sit in the middle of a crowd at a college football game and sit there and enjoy it. This is back in the day when they would have the national championship crown, Charlton, prior to the bowl game.
Yeah.
And this game was for the national championship between Texas and Arkansas. When you think about the Southwest Conference, how dominant it was in college football in the 60s.
Yeah.
And to have President Richard Nixon in the stands, just for the players alone, Charlton, think about how much that meant to them for the rest of their lives.
Isn't that amazing? Because it used to be an honor to go to the White House even just 2.5 years ago for teams. And I remember seeing Bill Clinton. He was at an NCAA Final Four when Arkansas, under Coach Nolan Richardson, had, they call 40 minutes of hell. And to see him in the stands, Barack Obama's been at games and seen that happen. It's great to see when presidents will actually take the time to go and watch young kids play. November 30, 1996. It was a high-stakes matchup between Steve Spurrier and the great Bobby Bowden. Both teams entered their 96 campaigns undefeated, with the Gators ranked number 1 in the country and the Seminoles ranked number 2. Florida State jumped out to an early lead. Florida crawled all the way back, and with the arm of eventual Heisman Trophy winner Danny Werfel, pulled out a 24-21 win, one of the greatest games in that rivalry. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, I always respected Coach Steve Spurrier, Charlton. You know, he had that whiny voice, but he was a guy who could create offense.
Yeah.
You know, you think about the history of his coaching, Charlton, whether it was at Florida, whether it was at South Carolina, even in the USFL, he's always been known for a high-powered offense. And Danny Werfel was one of those proteges of Steve Spurrier. Went on to win the Heisman Trophy. That year, Charlton, you think about some of the great players they had down at Florida. And Florida State has played some of the most memorable games when you think about the Southeast, Charlton. They've always been in the thick of things, especially under Coach Bobby Bowden.
And there's something about Bobby Bowden. He reminds me of the late Jackie Gleason and Smokey and the Bandit. They looked the same. They had the same type of southern drawl, Big C. They were gentlemen, but they loved what they did. Buford T. Justice loved chasing down bad guys, and Bobby Bowden loved giving guys a chance. November 25th, 1971. A handful of games they all claim to be the game of the century. But one really stands out above the rest. If you think about it, especially in the Midwest, It was Nebraska versus Oklahoma in 1971. In the old Big 8 days, remember that conference, Big C? This classic number 1 versus number 2 battle. It could not be missed. Easily defining this moment was the great Johnny Rodgers. He had a punt return for 72 yards, and Nebraska won that game 35-31. And no matter how old you get, that run feels like it happened yesterday, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, one of the more electrifying runs in college football, where he just darted back and forth from sideline to sideline, eventually turning it upfield. And big games always bring out your best.
Yeah.
You think about Keith Jackson broadcasting that game,
Nelly.
announcing the electrifying Johnny Rodgers. And Nebraska and Oklahoma were two teams that were always dueling in the Big 8, Charlton. And what a more fitting finish than to have these two teams battling for a national championship on national television.
It's amazing. And just thinking about the late Keith Jackson, and you think about some of our great broadcasters and orators, they're gone. But it was the legacy is still alive, and I just love football. And it was his voice, one of the earlier voices in college football, that made me want to sit down and listen to a game. September 2nd, 2007. Yes, this was the beginning of the end for the Lloyd Carr era at Michigan. No one could predict what was going to happen that afternoon in the Big House. Over 100,000 fans. Tiny Appalachian State. They upset Michigan because of a special teams play, Big C, you thought, 34-32.
Well, Charlton, Appalachian State just dominated Michigan early off in that game. Early in the game, Charlton, they had a 27-12 lead at halftime.
Yep.
You could see the panic in Michigan's heart, but they came back and they fought back for the lead. Michigan was trying to attempt a game-clinching field goal, Charlton, against Appalachian State. That kick was blocked. The kid who blocked the ball picked it up on the fly, Charlton, and took it back to the house in the Big House, and Appalachian State made history by upsetting Michigan, and Lloyd Carr's career at Michigan, you could see it falling down the tubes at that point.
And that's a shame that it happened. In fact, Appalachian State, they played one of those games that every little team hopes for. They always hope they can knock off the big guys, and they did, and it cost the man a job. November 9th, 2002. Talk about a heartbreaker. Down 30-27 to Kentucky. On the road, LSU needed a miracle. And the Tigers got one, a Hail Mary, a deflected pass from quarterback Marcus Random that was caught by Davey Henderson for a 74-yard score. And LSU outlasted Kentucky by the score of 33-27. And them good old boys down south are still celebrating it. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is when they talk about you play the game for 60 minutes. You
That's
play
right.
until the final whistle blows. Kentucky had taken the lead in the game, Charlton, and all of a sudden they were celebrating. They gave the coach the bath on the sideline.
I remember.
Next thing you know, LSU with a Hail Mary's pass, Charlton,
Yeah.
to Davey Henderson, who outran all the Kentucky defenders, and with no time left on the clock, LSU pulled out this miraculous win. And you had a wet Hal Mummy standing on the sideline after his loss.
Yeah, that's funny. You know, they like to say the party's not over until somebody sings. I forgot who they said, but we're in a gender equality world now, Big C. October 8th, 2017, Western Michigan. They beat Buffalo 71-68, and it was not a basketball score, Big C, in the longest game in college football history. And you think about the scoring in this game. 139 points scored in this game, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is a part of that.
All right, we were having a little bit of static with some weather. I told you our phone lines are being hacked. Putin, you can listen in. Just download the app, Big C. November 26, 2006, the highest scoring regulation game in college football history. The University of Pittsburgh, they beat the University of Syracuse 76-61, but the game did not need overtime, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is a classic Big East basketball game. Oh, we're talking about football right now.
Yeah, football.
You think about that. Putting 76 points on the scoreboard in regulation, not needing overtime.
Yep.
I mean, I would have hated to be in the defensive meeting that coming Monday, Charlton, after losing that game, or even winning the game.
Yeah.
You think about it. You win the game and you still give up 76 points. There were some defensive coordinators had guys running gases on Monday, Charlton.
Yeah, that's true, Big C. Some guys are still running. Did you ever skip practice if you guys ever gave up a lot of points, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, I didn't like to skip practice because you had to run even more, but I've been in a couple of those horrid games, Charlton, where it seemed like it was a pinball machine going off because the scoreboard kept changing.
That's funny.
And it wasn't in our favor.
It's just like Antonio Brown. October 15, 2005. Is 27-game win streak on the line. The mighty USC Trojans found itself down 31-28 to the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame in a back-and-forth game. In fact, 3 touchdowns were scored in the final 5 minutes and 4 seconds of that game. With only seconds remaining, it was Trojans quarterback Matt Leinart. He attempted to run the ball in himself for the game-winning touchdown. He had a little help from a guy named Reggie Bush, Big Z, the Heisman Trophy winner. I'm telling you, it used all of his 200 pounds to push Matt Leinart into the end zone for a 34-31 USC victory over the Irish. And that game had all of the trappings of college football. Notre Dame wore 2 different jerseys, blue in the first half, green in the second half, and they finished green with envy. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, the luck of the Irish wasn't smiling down on the Fighting Irish that evening in South Bend. USC, as you said, with the 27-game win streak on the line, they played like champions in that game, Charlton. And you think about one of the greatest non-conference rivals in college football, the historic USC-Notre Dame battles, and this was just another one of those epic finishes, Charlton.
Yeah, especially on the West Coast. That's when USC was like the current Alabama. It's all fair and love and war. There was a time when the Holiday Bowl was a huge game down in San Diego, when BYU and SMU with national powers back in the 80s. And you think about it, the Holiday Bowl was one of those games where the Mustangs had a backfield of the great Eric Dickerson, Craig James, and the Cougars had a quarterback Jim McMahon. SMU was up 45-21, Big C, with 4 minutes remaining in the game. McMahon led the Cougars to 21 straight points thanks to 3 touchdown passes and 1 onside kick. And they also blocked a punt for a 46-45 win over SMU. I still remember that game, Big C. Your thoughts?
Oh, I remember that game vividly, Charlton. You had Ron Myers coaching at SMU, the great Lavelle Edwards at BYU. You know, he had that team, Charlton, out there, I think it was the Mountain West at that time, that was always under the radar.
Yep.
When you think about the great quarterbacks that he produced out of that program, Charlton, Steve Young, Ty Detmer, Jim McMahon, Mark Edwards. I mean, a plethora of NFL quarterbacks that he produced out there.
Yeah.
But that Holiday Bowl, Charlton, which they used to play the night before Christmas in San Diego, which was always one of the most electrifying bowl games of the holiday season. And this was an historical game, Charlton, and everybody sat on the edge of their seat.
Yeah, it's actually called the WAC, the Western Athletic Conference, now the Mountain West. I remember those days, and everybody looked forward to the Holiday Bowl because it was always a high-scoring team. November 26, 1994, we have one more Sunshine State rivalry, and this time it's the 1994 edition of the game between Florida and Florida State, known as Choke at the Doak. Florida State overcame a 31-3 deficit. With 28 points in the fourth quarter, they rallied to tie Florida, which at that time had tied an NCAA record for the biggest comebacks, and the crowd was going nuts. Big C, your thoughts?
Pandemonium, Charlton, down at Doak Walker Stadium in Tallahassee. Florida State rallied from a dominant Florida performance in the first half and didn't give up. And, you know, we talked about this theme earlier, Charlton, where you play 60 minutes, if you remember that LSU-Kentucky game.
That's right.
Don't sit over there and get a coach a Gatorade bath before that final bell goes off. And that's what happened when Bobby Bowden was able to come back. And this is one of those games, Charlton, that you look as a tie as a victory.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's just like you play to win the game, and you got to keep playing until the final whistle sounds. And I think sometimes kids get carried away, but coaches can too. Think about this one. September 24th, 1994. You cannot ask for much more than this. There were 2 Associated Press top 10 teams. They were squaring off early in an early season game, especially when the game come down to the final play. Down 26-21 in the final seconds. It was Colorado quarterback Cordell Stewart. He tossed a 64-yard Hail Mary pass, which landed in the hands of Buffalo receiver Michael Westbrook. And after being tripped at the play later, would become known as the Miracle in Michigan, and the Buffaloes went on to win it 27-26, and that really put Colorado on the national map. Big C, your thoughts?
It did, Charlton. When you think about the heights that the Colorado program went to, they went on to eventually win a national championship out there in Boulder. But you think about some of the hard luck games that Michigan has had at home in the Big House. We talked about the Appalachian State loss earlier, Charlton. And then this game on national television versus the Colorado Buffaloes. And this catapulted Cordell Stewart onto the national stage. He went on to be a quarterback in the NFL with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Michael Westbrook ended up being a #1 draft pick.
Yeah.
But just great, exciting college football. When you think about the electricity that all these young men that we've talked about thus far has brought to the memories of all the fans that have been out there watching this game for the past 150 years.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we talk about Florida, California, Texas, Ohio as teams that have the top high school football programs. And then college, when you think about the college level, I would still say there's no state that rivals Florida with national champions from Miami, Florida State. In California, you only have USC as a national championship team. You got to go, USC, that's it. Everybody else is kind of challenged for it. And then in Texas, you've only had Texas. I don't think Texas A&M's ever won. I might be missing one, but I don't think so. And then Ohio, you only had Ohio State win a national championship. November 16, 1991, in the 1990s, there really were no rivalries that had more fuel than the Miami and Florida State battles. And one of the most memorable games of this series, Big C, it was the initial wide right with the Seminoles kicker Gary Thomas. He missed a would-be game-winning field goal as Miami went on to win 17-16 victory over Florida State. And almost more memorable than the loss was how Bobby Bowden just took it in stride. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you think about 1990s, the state of Florida was the heartbeat of college football.
Yeah.
You had multiple national champions in Florida State, Florida, and Miami. It seemed like every year one of those teams, Charlton, were competing for a national championship. And think about the in-state rivalry with all those young men playing college football. They grew up playing with and against each other, Charlton, in Pop Warner, in high school, and going on to those 3 great universities down in the Sunshine State of Florida.
Yeah.
But Bobby Bowden seemed to always be in the middle of these great games, Charlton, at Florida State. And this is where that historical wide right started down in Florida.
Yeah, and it's amazing because you oftentimes will follow the leader, that game that kids play, follow the leader. Bobby Bowden, the reason he recruited so well, he was always calm under pressure. Win or lose, he was the same, Big C. January 2nd, 1979, let's get back to the beautiful state of Texas, the Cotton Bowl between Notre Dame and Houston. The Cougars led 34-12 during an icy day early January. The comeback was even more impressive because Notre Dame quarterback Joe Montana was suffering from the flu. But Montana helped lead Notre Dame to 23 fourth quarter points and to come away with a 35-23 win over the Cougars down in Texas against all that Texas justice. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, everybody thought Michael Jordan was the only great player to ever play sick in a championship.
That's right.
When he was up in Utah and was suffering from the flu.
Yeah.
Joe Montana did it long before anybody knew who Mike was.
That's right.
And especially down in the cold in Dallas, it was a freezing New Year's Day down in the Cotton Bowl in Texas. This is when they played outside, Charlton, when they had no Jerry's World down there. In Joe Montana, this is where the legend of Joe was started, Charlton. And it catapulted him on to greatness. Everyone saw the cool calmness that he had as a college quarterback.
Yep.
San Francisco 49ers went on and took him in the 3rd round of that year's draft. And everyone knows what NFL history came after that.
Well, everybody knows this call. And the band is out of the field! The great Joe Starkey, November 20th, 1982. As far as an impossible finish goes, the old 5 lateral play, there were a couple of knees on the ground too, Big C. It's up there among the best in the history of college football. And that's why the big game between Cal and Stanford in 1982 is one of the greatest games in college football history. At the very least, it was one of the most iconic finishes as Cal beat Stanford 25-20, and the band was out of the field. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, probably one of the most memorable finishes in college football history. Because it played on every national outlet, whether it was sports or the news. Everyone showed the finish of the big game at Cal that year, Charlton, when the band came out on the field. As we talked about, you got to play for 60 minutes.
Yep.
The Stanford band, which was always been one of the more colorful bands in college football history, decided, we're going out here on the field because the game is over. There's no way that Cal can return this ball for a touchdown. Needless to say, the tuba player got the end of it in the end.
Yeah, and that was the great Jeff Noe who played in that game. I still remember doing many games at Strawberry Canyon, Cal Berkeley. One of the most beautiful settings in college football. That game will go down in history, Big C. October 11, 2004. It was Baylor and TCU An underrated rich history as far as many rivalry games go. It was a 52-48 shootout in Waco. You know they shoot a lot down in Texas, Big C. In 2011, that introduced Bears quarterback Robert Griffin as a legitimate Heisman Trophy candidate, and he would go on to win the award. But 3 years later, down 58-37 with less than 12 minutes to play, Baylor fired off 21 unanswered points in a span of about 7 minutes to tie that game. And with time expiring, the Bears kicker, Chris Callahan, hit a 28-yard field goal to complete the comeback victory. Big C, it was 61-58. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, when you think about Waco, Charlton, and what it stands for, we ain't coming out soon. That's what the Bears did. They didn't give up early in that game, Charlton. And you think about before they had all the scandals down at Baylor, Charlton, Art Browse had some of the most electrifying offensive players in the country down in Waco. And this was exemplified how great a football that this team could play down there, Charlton.
Yeah, I think that's just amazing. College football, even just thinking about these great games that have happened, it brings back the memories of what makes you happy. And, you know, in this day and era, with a lot of the political climate, it's good to be happy, Big C. Another day of happiness, January 3rd, 2003. No interconference call, no interference call in recent memory was more controversial than the one in the 2003 BCS National Championship game between Miami, Florida, and Ohio State. The Hurricanes led 24-17 in overtime. Now, the Buckeyes faced that game. They came into that game. They were looking at 4th and 3. Ohio State's pass was broken up by the Canes defensive back. It was Glenn Sharp, if I recall. And the game was over, except for it wasn't, because of prop betting, Big C, and some good old boys that hated Miami swagger. There was a really late flag. And in fact, I think they just threw the flag yesterday. It was so late, Big C. It fell on the field. Ohio State came back to beat Miami 31-24, and I thought it was the most egregious national championship. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, it was one of the more egregious calls in college football history to go back and cost the team a national championship. And if you think about the 90s, there were 2 calls that cost Miami 2 extra national championships in the 90s. And so we're talking about teams of this era. People talk about Alabama being one of the greatest programs. I still think Miami, that era of the 90s, Charlton, they were the greatest team in college football history. They were robbed at Notre Dame in the Convents versus the Catholics game, Charlton, when they got in on a 2-point conversion late in the game, and yet the officials ruled that they did not. And then this game against Ohio State, Charlton, where they had won the game. Game was over. People were starting to head to the locker room, and the officials said, oh, wait, I still got a flag in my pocket. Tossed it out on the field and cost Miami a championship. So when you talk about a team versus the establishment, that was the University of Miami Hurricanes versus the NCAA. And if you look at a lot of the rules that the NCAA has implemented against player celebrations, the way they wear their clothes and actions, you'll still see the University of Miami players on that tape, Charlton, that they still roll around and show to the university of the do's and the not do's in college football.
And I remember Miami. It was actually under Jimmy Johnson that poured it on Notre Dame, and I guess they had some good old boys upset that Miami would try to embarrass Notre Dame. But Notre Dame has done that for many, many moons, Big C, and no one complained. January 1, 1984, the 84 Orange Bowl between Miami and Nebraska. It will forever be known as the game where the Cornhuskers coach Tom Osborne decided to go for a 2-point play instead of a tie, and they failed in a 31-30 Miami victory over Nebraska. Among the players on that field, Big C, Nebraska's roster, Turner Gill, Irving Fryer, Mike Rozier, and Miami was just starting its football dynasty with the great Hallam Schlumberger. Big C, your thoughts?
And Charlton, this game is what catapulted Miami into national promises. This little school down there in Coral Gables, Charlton, really hadn't had much notoriety until they arrived on the scene that January 1st night in the Orange Bowl. And they took on the mighty Nebraska Cornhuskers, Charlton, and they physically dominated Miami in that game. They had great athleticism, something that Nebraska was not used to for 60 minutes of hell, Charlton, that Miami provided for him that night. But I do admire Tom Osborne for going for the 2. He said, I came here to win a game. That showed a lot of moxie from a head coach, Charlton, to say, this one's on me. You know, we all remember Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State talking about, I'm a grown man. Tom Osborne was a grown man long before Mike Gundy.
I'm 40, I'm a man, and we played to win the game. I think, and I want to get your thoughts before we go into the Big C timeout. If you're an athlete and you work so hard the whole season and off season, you get down to the championship game and you have a chance to win or lose or play for a tie. You gotta have some type of fire. You gotta be a lion. You want to win it, Big C. Do you agree with that mindset even now that you play to win? Because a lot of people play for the tie now, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you can play for the tie now because you have this thing called overtime.
Yeah.
Back in that era, Charlton, there was no such thing as overtime. And if you look at games, I mean, there was a game in '66 with Michigan State and Notre Dame where they played for a tie because they became pseudo-national championship teams because they had the same record.
Yeah.
At that time, Charlton, having a tie was not going to win you a national championship.
No.
Everyone knew of the national power that Nebraska was. They were one of the more dominant programs in the late 80s and early 90s in college football.
Yeah.
And with that dominant offensive line that they had with Dave Remington at center, Dean Steinkuhler at tackle, no one felt that anybody could hold Nebraska back. The most shocking part of that two-point conversion, Charlton,
what's that?
Is that everybody was expecting Nebraska to run.
Yeah.
And yet Turner Gill rolled out and tried to pass in the flats to his running back Davis, who dropped it in the end zone.
Yeah, so the play was the right play. It was executed all but the catch. And speaking of the catch, we're going to take what's called the Big C timeout. We're going to come back and finish our list of the top 25 college games. There's a lot more to get into, and you're going to love what we talk about when we come back after the break, and we hope that you'll come back with us. All right, we are back after what's called the Big C timeout. And what I love about Big C Sports is that we are also part of artificial intelligence. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast if you have a television at home. And the app that I really love is Alexa. Say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate all of our sponsors for their support. I want to just bring up also, people go through issues, man. They go through issues and they need help. And there is help for anybody. It's called the National Suicide Hotline. It's 800-273-8255. 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. And I hope that people take advantage of that number because it's always helped. Back to the top 25 games of all time. January 1, 2007. It was the 2007 Fiesta Bowl, one of the biggest games for all time. Think about it for the little guys in college football. After jumping out to an early lead, the Boise State Broncos watched their 18-point game and lead slip away in the second half, known as the Cinderellas of that year. They appeared to be over when Boise State quarterback, his name is Jared Zembrowski, threw a pick six with 1 minute remaining, and it gave the Sooners from Oklahoma a 35-28 lead. And that's when the magic happened. Boise State called a three more of the memorable plays in college football. Back to back to back, the hook and ladder in the final moments of the regulation, and the halfback option pass, and the Statue of Liberty in overtime, and Boise State miraculously beat Oklahoma 43-42. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, as you say, it was almost like yesterday that game was played. I think it resonates in everyone's memory, especially in the Big Eight at that time, Charlton, with Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You know, they walked into this game, Charlton, as the big boys.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. You know, who was Boise State on a national scale?
Yeah.
But Chris Peterson, who is now the head coach at the University of Washington, showed that he was a true coach, Charlton, that he could get his team prepared to play against anybody.
Yeah.
And you think about the memorable back and forth in that game, but especially in the last minute with Jared Zembrowski, the quarterback for Boise State, having the poise to do what he did. And the daring play calls by Chris Peterson, the hook and ladder. I mean, the last time we saw a play like that, Charlton, was in the Miami Dolphins and San Diego Chargers in a memorable game down in the Orange Bowl when Miami ran a hook and ladder with Tony Nathan.
Yeah.
And they scored a touchdown off of it, Charlton.
Yeah.
But Boise State stood up for every little college program in the nation, Charlton, to say, we can do it. You know, you got to believe. And that's what the Boise State Broncos went into that game. I know you use that phrase a lot of times, Charlton. You got to believe. You got to believe.
Yep.
Everybody in the Potato State that night, Charlton, was believing.
Yep, they're believing again, Big C, because there's still enough. They're still a good team. Both teams are still prominent, Big C. And now Boise State's playing Florida State down in Florida coming up later this year. November 30th, 2013. No moment was more dramatic for Auburn during its 2013 National Championship game run. Now, you think about it, and I know this is big for you down south. The Iron Bowl against Alabama, it was down, and then there was a kick six. If you think about it, they're 6 points down. I think it was 21-7 at one point in that game. What really happened in that game shocked me. In the second quarter, Auburn made a thrilling comeback, and eventually they traded touchdowns with the Alabama Crimson Tide to tie things at 28. Now, less than a minute remaining, I believe it was Adam Griffith, a 57-yard field goal fell short, and it fell into the arms of Auburn's Chris Davis. And as the Alabama players kind of stalled, thinking he's going to just take a knee, this guy was waiting. He was waiting for what happened. He took the ball and returned it over 100 yards the other way, and it gave Auburn an amazing 31-28 win. And I remember the play-by-play callers from Auburn, they were going out of their minds, Big C. And the guys from Alabama, they were sick, Big C. Your thoughts?
They were sick, and the people in Tuscaloosa, Charlton, are still hungover from that game.
Yeah.
You know, you think about just a few moments ago, you talked about Tom Osborne and Miami going against, going for the 2-point conversion in the Orange Bowl for a national championship.
Yeah.
They didn't have overtime at that time. In this game, Auburn and Alabama would have had overtime if Nick Saban had chose not to go for that field goal attempt.
Yeah.
One of the things you have to look at on a long field goal attempt, Charlton, in the game is that you normally have offensive linemen in the game that are blocking. You don't have cover people like you have on a punt team.
Yep.
And so when this ball went wide right and went into the end zone, you got 5 300-pound linemen at least out there trying to cover this kick return, Charlton.
Yeah.
But, you got to give it to Davis, who had the prescience, Charlton, to say, hey, let me try this. And, he was given credit for a 100-yard return, Charlton, but he must have ran at least 104, 105 yards back.
Yeah.
And he was totally gassed by the time he got into the end zone. But you talk about one of the greatest finishes in SEC history, Charlton.
It was amazing.
This was that miracle run when we talked about earlier when Nick Marshall hit that deep pass against Georgia.
Yep.
2 weeks later, they came back and had this memorable victory against Alabama, Charlton. And this was their road trip to Pasadena when they played Florida State for the national championship.
I remember it, and even the Rose Bowl was amazing, but I don't think any game in Auburn, Alabama history, that's like the Cal Stanford play. That game, to everybody, the good old boys, the old timers, they will always remember that. January 2006, not all national championship games in the BCS era were created equally. The USC Trojans, they were riding a mighty 34-game winning streak. They were going for a three-peat, and their streak was amazing because they were blowing people out. They were led by Heisman Trophy winners Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart. This was the height of the USC dynasty. However, them good boys in Texas, they had other plans. Longhorns quarterback Vince Young, he had other plans. In fact, he had 467 total yards of offense. He also scored the go-ahead touchdown on a 4th down and 5 with 19 seconds remaining. And the mighty Texas Longhorns, they came into Southern California and they shocked the whole Southern California country. I mean, they beat them 41-30 in a victory over USC. But if you talk to guys like Lynn Swann, Ronnie Lott, and Marcus Allen, they left a lot of points on the scoreboard or off the scoreboard if you're USC. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, once again, I mean, how do we keep topping game after game?
Yeah.
Well, every time you think that you've hit the best game that you can bring up, Charlton, you've brought up another one. And this is what college football has meant over the decades. Memorable moments, Charlton, captivating moments, moments that linger in the history of your mind. And this was one of those games, Charlton, when you talk about Texas and USC. This wasn't a rivalry game, Charlton.
No.
This was just a game of great athletic competition.
Yep.
I mean, two coaches battling back and forth. Mack Brown had been out to the Rose Bowl before, but he had lost to Alabama in a championship game, Charlton.
Yeah.
This was his time to shine, and he wasn't going to let it go. with quarterback Vince Young, Charlton, at the helm.
Yep.
And with a memorable finish, Charlton, you could not ask for more when you thought you had seen it all in championship games.
In fact, in reference for Vince Young, they had actually played in the Rose Bowl the year before. They beat Michigan on a field goal in the last seconds. Vince Young had over 800 yards of total offense in games versus Big Ten champion Michigan and Pac-10 champion at the time, USC. In back-to-back years, over 800 yards of total offense. And it's amazing that college football did not give him the same type of respect that maybe he should get. Because if Tim Tebow is known as the guy from the South, I know Texas is Southwest, but people still say they're looking for that next Tim Tebow type of quarterback in college football. I'm telling you, it was Vince Young before Tim Tebow. Big C, your thoughts?
He was an electrifying player, Charlton. He did all that Mack Brown asked of him and more at the University of Texas. When Texas needed a big play, Vince Young often delivered.
Yeah, he often delivered. Big C, I'm going to give you two more, and then I want to get into a few more things. November 25th, it was 2018. It was the rarest of sights college football has to offer. Kyle Field. If you haven't seen a game at Kyle Field in Texas, you got to go see it. The fans celebrated a marathon game. It stretched through 7 overtime quarters. Both Texas A&M and LSU scored on all 7 of the overtime possessions. It lasted 4 hours and 53 minutes. The Aggies finally prevailed as quarterback Kellen Mond hit wide receiver Kevin Hendricks for a 2-point conversion. Big C, it was 74-72. Them good boys in Texas beat LSU. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, we've seen some basketball scores in this group of games that you have given out in some of the greatest scoring games of all time in college football, Charlton.
Yeah.
But 74-72, you're talking about players being gassed.
Yeah.
5 hours, Charlton, this game lasted 5 hours. I mean, all the barbecue in the parking lot was cold in Texas at that time.
Yeah.
You had to go out there and fan some of the flies away. But talk about a memorable event for the fans and the players, Charlton, to be part of the history. And you talk about being down in Kyle Field where you have 102,000 ravenous fans and the 12th man down there at Texas A&M. But you just, you talked about the game at the Rose Bowl with USC and Texas.
Yep.
Every time you think that a game can't be topped, Charlton, it finds a way to be topped in college football.
Well, I'm sure them good old boys, they always say, West Coast media, I know you and I have this bias thing. I know I'm biased for the West Coast. I know you say you're not biased for the South, but you good old boys stick together. And here's another game that people say might be the most exciting game ever in college football. January 9th, 2017, and it was one of the most memorable comeback championship games in the BCS history. University of Clemson, led by Deshaun Watson, and their rematch versus Alabama. They came out on top. It was Dabo Swinney's first national championship game in the middle of Alabama's dynasty versus the great Nick Saban. It was a 34-31 come-from-behind victory. In this 2-game series, quarterback Deshaun Watson of Clemson, think about what he did. We talked about how great Vince Young was against Michigan and USC, over 800 yards. Deshaun Watson combined against Alabama, arguably the best defense in the country. He combined for over 1,056 total yards, 8 touchdowns, 7 passing, and 1 rushing. Big C, I'm sure Garoppolo's hiding from this guy's numbers. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you thought that Vince Young was the best two-game quarterback in championship series, Charlton, Deshaun Watson took it to the next level. You talk about 1,100 yards from one quarterback. You're just one of the greatest defenses of its era in college football. Deshaun Watson did that. You talked about the memorable finish with USC and Texas, Charlton, with Vince Young running it in the last few seconds of the ball game. Deshaun Watson capped that, Charlton, with a rollout pass hitting Mike Renfro, the receiver, out in the flat, Charlton, to beat Alabama in that memorable comeback in that game 2 of that series, Charlton, for Clemson to win that national championship. This is what's great about college football, Charlton. What makes everybody excited about college football? We all remember the Super Bowl last year in Atlanta. I think it was a drubbing that New England gave to the Los Angeles Rams. I think they didn't score 20 points in the game. But when we talk about college football, the electricity, the memory of the great Keith Jackson announcing the biggest games on the college football stage, Charlton.
Yep.
Whoa, Nelly resonates in everybody's mind. The big uglies, the big eaters, all those acronyms that he had about college football players.
Yep.
And every time we think that we've seen it all in college football, Charlton, we get more and more amazed every year because it seems like the hype of these players just get better. That the championship games just get greater. No one ever sits on their butt at a college football game, Charlton. Because the electricity starts when you plug in that ticket in the turnstile and you get inside and you don't want to be the first person to leave.
No, you don't want to be the first person to leave, especially down south. I'll give you guys that. Your crowds are amazing, especially for college football. You know, there's a song back in the day, I think it was Ashford and Simpson, called The Second Time Around. It was talking about relationships. You think about McMahon, Vince McMahon, and the XFL.
That would have been Shalimar.
Shalimar. See, I knew you would know it, Big C. But the second time around, you think about McMahon, and I admire men and women who try. They're the vanguards of this society, whether it is the Mellons or the Vanderbilts, anybody who's trying to create industry, they're going to come with a head, what they call a fork in the road at times. And when a league fails, people say, see, I told you it wouldn't work. But I appreciate men who keep trying. We have this new league now, the XFL, football cities in the East. There's only 8 so far. We have the New York Guardians, the DC Defenders, Tampa Bay Vipers, and we have St. Louis Battlehawks, Big C. In the West, we have the Los Angeles Wildcats, the Seattle Dragons, the Dallas Renegades, and then the Houston Roughnecks. Now, everybody has a choice in what they like. You can't please everybody. But give me your feeling about playing this new league in cities where NFL is already king, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, regardless of where you go now in the football arena, Charlton, there's already somebody there that's dominant, whether it's a college football game that's dominant, or that program, or an NFL team that controls the market. You know, you're going to be limited wherever you go in the U.S. I mean, but you got to try to get what's left of a crowd. If you can pick up enough former players from an NFL roster, Charlton, that were in that city, it may help you get over the hump. But what football really is driven by, Charlton, is television. I mean, we've seen a lot of games in NFL games, Charlton, that they don't have packed houses right out there where you are. I mean, Oakland, they tarp off the top of the Coliseum.
That's right.
For NFL football games. You look at San Francisco. That stadium hasn't, I don't think it's ever been full unless for the Super Bowl out there with Carolina and Denver.
I agree.
So when we travel around this great country and we see all of these games at NFL cities, Charlton, there's a lot of teams that don't sell out. But I warn against McMahon trying to compete against God, realistically, because NFL is God on Sunday. And so many of those people are just loyal to the product because the NFL has done such a masterful job in marketing itself. And so that's the thing that this new league really has to fight against, Charlton, is the overall marketing of the NFL and what type of television package is going to be behind this new league.
Well, I wish them well because it creates jobs. But we just saw another league go out of business, didn't even finish the year. It's hard to go into someone's house and compete with who owns that house. And like you said, the NFL's God for a lot of fans. College football can compete with the NFL, but not many more things can. I still wish them well because it gives men jobs. I want to bring up just a few things that are happening in the NFL. Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, he tells the media about quarterback Josh Rosen. You know, they got him from Arizona. He played at UCLA, St. John Bosco High School out of Southern California. And he says that some guys are just not ready to start. Now, I think he's honest by making that statement, Big C. But I think he's getting a little bit of pushback and people saying he's not supporting his quarterback. I disagree. Some guys are not ready to start, Big C. The coaches know that more than anybody. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if you could ever say that a coach is not supporting his quarterback because the coach is there to support their team.
Their team.
And they're there, if they want to keep their job, then they got to put the best players in play that are going to help them win so that he can keep his job. If you look at the last coach that Rosen had, Wilkerson, he only lasted 1 year playing
Rosen. Yeah.
So maybe Flores is thinking, I want to stay in the job more than 1 year, so I might have to look at this other quarterback in Fitzpatrick and giving him the nod because of his veteran knowledge of the league. All players don't grasp the NFL. If you go back and you look at the number of quarterbacks that have been drafted over the last decade in the first round, Charlton, all of them are not on NFL rosters, and the last one that didn't make an NFL roster would have been Paxton Lynch. That Denver drafted just 3 short years ago in the first round. So just because you draft a quarterback in the first round doesn't mean that he's going to be an NFL caliber player.
I agree, very much so. Now, an owner can come out and say what they got to say. I'm for Jerry Jones on this statement, and again, I don't really get much into what an owner says. It's their money, they do what they want to do. NFL owner, Dallas Cowboys owner, Jerry Jones. Now, he told the media, the buck stops here. He said, I have a right to be able to joke with Ezekiel Elliott. I've earned that right. I think he spent some money keeping Ezekiel Elliott out of his legal troubles because Jerry Jones advocated for Ezekiel Elliott when a lot of people turned their backs on Ezekiel Elliott because Ezekiel Elliott knows how to be an idiot at times. I think Jerry's right to say, look, I've earned the right to joke this guy and kind of give him the business, Big C. I agree with Jerry Jones. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, any owner has the right to say as they choose. They're the ones writing the checks. They're the ones paying your mortgage. And also getting you out of trouble a lot of times, going to bat for you against the league. The thing that I look at during the off season of the NFL is that there's so many stories about contracts. Is that everyone gets lost in contract negotiations. And as they're telling these stories about contracts, you need to understand the finances of the NFL. Come back and talk about salary structure, the salary cap, that teams are limited on how they operate. The most important person, Charlton, on any NFL team is the guy who handles the finance, the guy who is sitting there dealing with the finances of the team. That financial executive of the team, Charlton, who is sitting there saying, this is how much money we have, this is how we're going to move it around on this contract. We're going to restructure this contract. That's the most important guy on any NFL team. It's not the quarterback. It's not the running back. It's not the defensive end, Charlton. It's the guy who is working the numbers to figure out how to structure the contract. Money is there. Money is not always there. All these players are getting disgruntled because they're saying, well, now this guy is making more than me. As I keep saying, if you think that you're as good as you are, sign just 1-year deals with no option. That gives you the ability to walk in every year and say, okay, I had this type of year. Now I can be the highest paid player again at my position in the league. No player in the NFL is willing to go out on a limb and say, I want to play under 1-year contracts. Everybody wants between 3 and 5 years on their contract. When they get that 5-year contract, Charlton, 2 years into it, all of a sudden salary caps have escalated. 10 players are making more money than what he is in that position, and he's feeling adjusted. Now he's holding the team ransom. I need to renegotiate. The salary cap implications in the NFL is what the media needs to talk about, not that somebody's holding out wanting more money.
Wanting more money. I want to take a little side note, because one of my favorite TV stars, who's a big sports fan, Larry King, he's 85 years old. His 8th wife, in 22 years they've been married. Her name is Sean Southwick King. She's 59 years old. They're divorcing over irreconcilable differences. I'm going to tie this story in. Rumors are she was having an affair, but that's not the really call. I mean, everybody in LA does what they want to do. But the rumor is she was asking him for more money. She wanted him to change his will, which would give her more money as the 8th wife, and he already has a family, Big C. So she's asking him to compete against his own kids. I'm tying it into this. People want more money in everything they do. And she's trying to have him compete with his kids. But Larry's saying no. Long story short, NFL owners, they're the same. Athletes and entertainers, they're the same. A lot of times people get with you, not because they love you when they're 26 years younger. They're in love with the money. And so Larry had things in writing to protect his assets. I think Jerry Jones is the same. A lot of these young players, I love what you said about if you think you're worth more, then be willing to go for a 1-year deal, but that's not smart, so they won't do it. But Larry King, just like all the athletes and entertainers, they got to put things in writing to protect their money, and I think that's what Larry King, was Larry King or Jerry Jones or anybody else worth a lot of money, they always do that to protect themselves, Big C. That make any sense?
Well, that's called prenuptial, Charlton. It's called knowledge, being able to protect your assets as you go on. And if you've gone and gotten an eighth wife, that's like buying a car. You're just going to trade it in. You traded in 7 other models prior to that, so the next one along lines. And you're not marrying Larry King for you look. Let's be honest about that.
Hey, beauty's in the...
Even with all the male enhancements that are out there, you didn't marry that guy for his look.
Well, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I want to finish with this story because it's real talk, and Big C always does real talk. Major League Baseball, it gave a warning about male enhancement products, including the PEDs, that many players must take notice of this. Now, we told you, who's that guy, Frank Thomas? He's always doing something about get bigger, stronger, and faster. Like, Frank, come on, Frank. But Major League Baseball, think about this. Major League Baseball is onto something. You know how you've been saying, and you've been an advocate saying, something's up with baseball. More home runs are being hit by more people. Major League Baseball, as of Wednesday, 30 guys are on pace to hit more than 40 home runs, and 20 guys are on pace to hit more than 30. Baseballs are flying out of the park. Now, there's people who've taken, steroids or, HGH or different kind of creams. Now these things you can buy at gas station, and they said that's part of what happened with Lamar Odom when he passed out in Las Vegas. And it's a real thing because a lot of young kids, they'll try to do these things to get bigger, stronger, and faster because it gives them an edge. Big C, does that make any sense that baseball and even football and basketball should warn the athletes about taking things that make you bigger, stronger, and faster because it also has side effects? Big C, your thoughts?
So that's what they really been meaning by swinging a big stick in baseball.
I guess so.
And the bats were juiced.
The size of the bat matters just enough, Big C.
I mean, when we talk about the record pace of home runs that have been hit this year in Major League Baseball, male enhancement is going to make you stronger. It's going to pump you up even more. So I guess your bat will be a little bigger and more powerful at that time, Charlton. And who's going to regulate how much you take? But I can understand professional sports taking a stance on this, Charlton, because
they should.
When you talk about performance enhancement, regardless of whether it's in the bedroom or whether it's on the diamond, you've enhanced something. And so your body's going to perform at a peak level that's not natural.
Well, think about this, too, because we speak to young kids also. Over-the-counter sexual enhancement pills, they're part of an unregulated supplement industry. Now, think about the money. It's estimated to be worth more than $30 billion. $30 billion, just so people can get down. All they got to do is find the Teddy Pendergrass. Basically, they don't need those pills. But the Food and Drug Administration in July, they added that the product has a list of more than 250 tainted sexual enhancement performance supplements. And that's what they're saying. Lamar Odom, I guess he overdosed and fell into a coma after he overdosed on herbal Viagra. Now, don't you see those programs, Cialis, Viagra, everything else advertised by the sports leagues? But I think they're right. A lot of kids don't know what they're doing, and adults, based on Lamar Odom, are some things worth dying for? No, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, as we look at so much in the unregulated over-the-counter industry talking in America, whether it's a smokeless tobacco problem, as they say,
horrible,
or even these enhancement, supplements that players can take. The thing about advertisement is that when young players, young athletes see these things on television, and they're being marketed by the athletes that they admire.
That's right.
They sneak in and buy these same products, Charlton. And they're utilizing it. I know that they've always talked about players staying hydrated and players falling over, especially a lot of high school and college players, Charlton, that have lost their lives in the past several years in practice. What type of supplements are they taking? I know people get blamed saying that they're not monitoring the athlete properly, but they don't always know what an athlete is taking over the counter. And on the college level, they're not monitoring all the athletes for supplements like they do on the professional level, Charlton.
No.
So I think it is a devastating industry out there towards athletes because they're putting things in their body that they haven't done enough proper research and not knowing how they're going to react in heated, intense situations.
And you find that oftentimes it's something to be real. Talk to your doctors. Everybody wants to enjoy life, but you don't want to lose your life over something you don't know you're taking. I want to say you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Speaker. You can follow Big C Sports on YouTube. You can ask Alexa. Say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. And then I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. You can also follow us on Xfinity Comcast Television. So I really appreciate our sponsors for all of their support. And we talked about baseball and those enhancements. Think about how many people are hitting home runs. Tonight's schedule: Los Angeles Angels at Texas, Kansas City at Baltimore, Washington at Pittsburgh. You have Cleveland at New York Mets, Philadelphia at Boston, Miami at Atlanta. Atlanta have to be feeling pretty good about themselves. They took 2 out of 3 from L.A. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is the thick of the Major League pennant race, Charlton, right now. We're getting towards the end of August. Everything is heating up. September is going to be a torrid month in Major League Baseball. Both of those teams are leading the East and Western Division, and Atlanta really needed to take that series over the Dodgers.
Yeah, they needed to, and the Dodgers got a big one coming up against the Yankees over the weekend. Milwaukee at St. Louis, San Francisco at Chicago, Detroit at Houston, New York Yankees at Oakland. Oakland's playing them tough, Big C, out here on the West Coast. Toronto at L.A., and some matchup games. You have San Diego at Cincinnati, Seattle at Tampa, the White Sox at Minnesota, and Colorado at Arizona. I know what we talk about is so vast and what we do. I really love our segment on college football. I know you're looking forward to these games. I learned so you can marinate meat but not marinate salad. Is that what you're saying, Big C?
Yes, you want that meat to get comfortable, Charlton, when it's in the fridge for a couple days.
Well, I'll take your advice on that next time. Back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, I think those people from up north have been listening to you sing Whoa Canada, whatever you've been trying to resonate out there.
Yeah.
I think they're going to kidnap the Oakland Raiders and the Green Bay Packers to play a football game up in Winnipeg, Canada tomorrow night. You're going to have to be worried about it might get some snow on them up north.
Yeah, well, it might get some snow on them up north. But also, with the Raiders coming to town, make sure they put stickum on everything that you don't want to be taken out of Canada. Big C, whoa, Canada. You can speak up Canada every Monday through Friday at 5 to 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.